everybody, so today I'm starting a brand new series on my channel where I do head-to-head matchups for some of my favorite books, and today we're doing two of the first entries of some of the greatest stories ever told, two of the greatest series. We're doing The Eye of the World versus The Way of Kings. And so I'm going to be breaking this down into 5 separate categories. We're going to be looking at prologue, we're going to be looking at originality, we're going to be looking at plot, character, as well as ending. Now that's ending, not epilogue. And then before I get into the breakdown, spoiler alert for just these two books. So if you've only read The Eye of the World and The Way of Kings, none of the other entries in the series, that's totally okay. I'm just going to be focusing on these two books. And so to start off with prologue, I know that The Way of Kings kind of has 2 opening segments, but the first part's more of a prelude, so we're going to kind of ignore that, and we're just going to focus on the prologue with Sazeth. And I think it's a really strong opening. I think that it's a great introduction to Brandon Sanderson's magic system. I think Sazeth is a really interesting character. Also, hope I'm saying his name right, not positive. I think he's a really interesting character. I think that, the assassination of a king, that's really big. This is very, kind of ground moving. You know that this is setting up some conflict. But I'm going to have to give this one to The Eye of the World, because I think that the prologue for Eye of the World might be my favorite prologue in any story ever, just because, first, you start off, you're totally confused. You have but that's a given with prologues. You're always going to be confused in the prologue. But it's that ending portion where the world literally breaks, where Lews Therin breaks the world. It doesn't get more earth-shattering than that. Literally. And so I'm going to give this first entry, I'm going to give it to The Eye of the World. So that's Eye of the World 1. The next category is originality. And I think most of us, if anyone who's read The Eye of the World, you know that it is very, very derivative of The Lord of the Rings. And that's on purpose. It is supposed to be kind of an homage to The Lord of the Rings. It's Robert Jordan's retelling of the story of The Lord of the Rings. But because of that, not super original. On the flip side, we have The Way of Kings, which I think is a really, really original story. It's you get this. I love the fact that we get this story told from way up high. We got Dalinar up here, we got Kaladin way at the bottom, we got Shallan kind of right in the middle. Shallan really serves just more world building in this book. But I think it's an original story because of that. I think we see a lot of things that we haven't seen in fantasy, and so because of that, I'm gonna give originality to The Way of Kings. Probably doesn't surprise anybody. The Eye of the World is just so derivative of Lord of the Rings. Not a bad thing, but not the most original. So next we're going to be talking about plot. And it's a little interesting when we're talking about these two books, because with The Eye of the World, we have everyone kind of starting together and then branching outwards. But with The Way of Kings, we have everyone starting from far away and then they kind of come together. And for me personally, for my personal taste, I like it when you have these people, they start on opposite ends of the world and they come together, because I really find these meetups really satisfying. And I think The Way of Kings does a great job of that. When you have Kaladin and Bridge 4, when Kaladin meets Adolin, when he meets Dalinar, I find that so satisfying. I don't know why. It's just one of my favorite things in the stories. And then with The Eye of the World, we do see the plot beats being a little bit more predictable. I find the stuff with Shadow Logos, I thought that was really interesting. I found Logain to be so interesting in The Eye of the World, but he's barely in it. And so that was a little, I always wish that we'd gotten more Logain in The Eye of the World. And then I also think that when Rand first runs into Elaine and Gawain, I think that that's really interesting. But overall, I find The Way of Kings plot to be a little bit more dynamic, and because of that, I'm going to give this one to The Way of Kings. Next, I want to talk about character, and this is another really interesting one, because with The Eye of the World, we're basically just with Rand. But towards the we branch out a little bit, we get some Perrin, we get some Nynaeve, but it's mostly Rand, and I find Rand, at least in this, and this is not talking about Wheel of Time as a whole, but within The Eye of the World specifically, I find there to be not a lot in the way of character development. We see a lot of Rand denying, a lot of him not really accepting, what, of course I was born in Emond's Field, this is ridiculous, of course Tam's my dad, and it's a lot of denying from Rand, and that's really interesting. It's great setup. If we're looking at holistically with the Wheel of Time, it's perfect. It's great character arcs in the Wheel of Time, but pretty static when we're talking about just the Eye of the World. On the other hand, we got The Way of Kings, and with The Way of Kings, I feel like with Kaladin, you see one of the best character arcs in any book ever. I really seeing him start at just the absolute lowest. When he's thinking about walking off that cliff, it hits you so hard, and to see him overcome that, and then when he weathers through that storm, they literally hang him in a storm, he literally weathers the storm. It's just so satisfying, and to him, and to save Dalinar at the end, that character arc alone, and then on top of that, you have Dalinar, which is also just such a fascinating character. No shade towards Shallan, but just I find Dalinar to also just be such an engaging character, and with such this troubled past, and he's trying to be right, he's trying to live this perfect life now, trying to live by this code. You have 2 phenomenal characters right off the bat, and you have some awesome characters with the Eye of the World. But Mat is barely even in the Eye of the World, so I think with character, I'm gonna have to give it to The Way of Kings. And so for this next category, ending, this is probably the closest one to call for me personally, just because I love both of these endings so much. I mean, with the Eye of the World, I mean, you have this introduction, like, Rand deals with two Forsaken, he goes to the literal Eye of the World, he has this big showdown with Baal Zimon, so interesting. And I think that I haven't finished the series yet, but I think that there's probably a ton of foreshadowing that happens in that interaction, and probably all of the Eye of the World. I should have made foreshadowing a category, but I didn't want it to be spoilers for the rest of the series, so maybe next verses I'll do foreshadowing as a category. But I think that the Eye of the World has such an awesome ending. But The Way of Kings, you got the Sanderlanche, the Sanderson avalanche that he puts at the end of his books, and The Way of Kings delivers on that in very big ways. I mean, you get the Kaladin Dalinar meetup. I mean, just Kaladin, you get the betrayal of Sadeas. You get Dalinar confronting Elhokar about, like, basically setting him up. And it's just, I mean, he beats him without any shard play. He takes it away from it. Like, that's just such a power move. Oh my gosh, I loved that scene when Dalinar is like, if I wanted to kill you, I could do it right now. I mean, that alone, and also you get some pretty big revelations from Shallan. And so I really wasn't expecting this to be a 4-1 victory for The Way of Kings, but that seems to be the way it's going, because I'm going to have to give ending to The Way of Kings too, in a very, very close call. And so I was not expecting it to be such a runaway going into this, but we got The Way of Kings winning on plot, character, ending, as well as originality, and we got the Eye of the World taking it with Prologue, taking it strong with Prologue. Now, I know that there's some people who are probably going to say that the Eye of the World, just like the Way of Kings couldn't have existed without the Eye of the World. Maybe that's true, but looking at them, just influence wasn't a category, and when I'm talking about with just these categories, I gotta give it to Way of Kings. But I know that there's probably a lot of people that disagree with me, so please comment down below where you think who should have won which categories. Let me know why. But if you enjoyed this head-to-head and you want to see more, comment down below which books you'd like to see going head-to-head, preferably books I've read, but even if they're not, I would still recommendations for books that I should read. And then, yeah, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe, and have a great day.